Okay, so let's talk about some different individual differences separately. We'll start off with a big favorite in IO psychology, cognitive ability. Let's begin this part of our discussion by distinguishing between a few different important terms. First, let's start with IQ. Now, IQ is the old school way of looking at intelligence. It really isn't intelligent. It's intelligence. It simply refers to how intelligence used to be measured. So it's really just a historical term. Cognitive ability refers to very specific abilities, such as our ability to memorize information, to reason, to comprehend things, and finally to problem solve. In IO psychology, we're very fond of talking about intelligence, or what we call G. We think of G as general intellectual capacity, or another way to say that is the ability to learn and adapt to an environment. We have a secret language in our field, and sometimes we'll make fun of people and say things like, oh, don't be so tough on so and so. They don't have enough G. So if you ever hear someone saying that they don't have enough G, that's not a nice thing. Our hoity-toity IO psychologist tells us that intelligence is a very general mental capability that, among other things, involves the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experience. Of course, I never like the hoity-toity definitions, but I think I should provide them to you just in case you're wanting them. Is G important? You might be asking. Well, yes, it absolutely is. But let me clarify. It's important whenever we must manipulate information. Now, you tell me, is there any job that does not require the manipulation of information? I can't think of any. So yeah, G is really important. Let's take a look at the relationship between G and work performance. What you see here in front of you is G on the x-axis and performance on the y-axis. The different color lines that you see here represent the relationship between G and performance for different types of jobs. And in our case, these jobs are engineers in the red line, operators at like the plants that we see here in our area in blue, and finally police officers in the green line. One thing we know from research by Schmidt and Hunter, and this is a seminal, very important article, is that intelligence is the single best predictor of work performance. So it's the big daddy in employment selection. It's our big hammer. It's the best that we've got. We also know that the complexity of the job matters. In other words, for really complex jobs like engineers represented by the red line, G is really important for predicting job performance. What about police officers? Take a look at that line there, and that's the one in green. Doesn't seem to be the same, does it? So high G for police officers seems to be detrimental. Any ideas why this might be? Think about that for a second. Well, the issue here is that for police officers, having a really high level of performance is related to, having a high level of intelligence, or G, is related to low levels of performance, because we have found in our research that they tend to get bored on the job and it's not a really good fit for them. We also know that there are more specific abilities that play a role in determining the specific types of work performance that are out there and exist in the world. And Carroll is a researcher that came up with a way of looking at specific abilities and how they are tied to work performance. Let's take a look at Carroll's model. Basically, Carroll proposed that there is 3 different layers of intelligence. What you see is at the top, G, which is a broad, again, measure of intelligence, or our ability to do a number of different things. And then as you go further down, we get down to more specific abilities. And so G breaks down into several different more specific abilities: fluid intelligence, crystallized intelligence, and on down to cognitive speediness. An important note for us to understand, though, is that G will only get you so far. So, in addition to that, you need to know that different jobs require additional specific cognitive abilities. Let's take a look at some of these different cognitive abilities. So, for example, there's perceptual speed, which is the ability to quickly recognize similarities and differences in visual stimuli. What kind of a job do you think would require perceptual speed? Well, a good example of that would be a designer recognizing irregular patterns in a fabric. Another specific cognitive ability that predicts a specific type of work performance is number aptitude, which we define as the ability to work with numbers in a quick and accurate manner. Think about that. What kind of job would you think number aptitude be important for? Well, an accountant spotting an error in a financial report is a good example of a job that requires the specific skill of number aptitude. Finally, there is another example called spatial visualization, which is the ability to imagine how various objects will look when rotated or moved in space. What do you think would be a good example of a job that would require spatial visualization? Well, an architect planning a change in a building design would be a good example of a job that requires spatial visualization. Watch this video on your own. Click the link and watch the video. If we were in a face-to-face class, we talk about this more in depth, but it's pretty interesting to think about whether or not there is a need to measure cognitive ability, or G, in the NFL or National Football League. And so if you look at this video, they talk about the use of a specific test that's designed to measure G, or cognitive ability, called the Wonderlic. It's been around for a long time, and what this research seems to indicate is that certain types of positions in the game of football are related to certain types of performance on that Wonderlic. So I'm interested in hearing what you guys think. So after you guys see this, why don't you hit me up in the forum and let me know your thoughts about that. If you'd like, there are some related links that you can look at. At the top, there is a link that lists some famous football players and their reported Wonderlic scores. And then below that, you can go to this ESPN link that has a link to take the Wonderlic. And it also lists average scores for various positions in football. So if you're ready, go ahead and take that Wonderlic and see how well you score. And now let's move on and talk about physical abilities. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but probably the most popular model of physical abilities is that proposed by Hogan. Like Carroll, Hogan says that there are some general physical factors that relate to some more specific physical abilities. I won't read through these, but this is found in a lot of different textbooks and is reflective of the different types of skills that we see regarding physical abilities. Now let me ask you a question. Are physical ability tests fair? What we find in research is that women typically have less muscle mass and lower levels of cardiovascular endurance. In addition, women seem to have more flexibility, though, than men. Most jobs, unfortunately, require strength and stamina and not flexibility. So while women have more flexibility, unfortunately, we're lacking compared to the men with regard to strength and stamina. But wait, before you hang up the sign here on women and say that it's not, these tests aren't fair for women. One thing we know in IO psychology is that women can increase their strength and stamina through training. In addition, when women apply for certain jobs, whether it is for the job of a police officer or firefighter, we know that candidates only need to demonstrate a sufficient amount of strength and stamina. So, for example, the requirement may be that you need to be able to lift 50 pounds. Well, it doesn't matter that a man might be able to lift 200 pounds. If a woman can lift the 50 pounds, then she has met the minimum requirements of strength and stamina and might be able to do that job.